Let's begin. All right, welcome everyone to the 2023 Bates NAUDC final. My name is Tyler. I am the chief adjudicator and the chair of the grand final of NAUDC 2023.
Woo, Tyler!
Yeah! As someone whose first debate tournament only 3 years ago was NAUDC 2019, it's an honor to be here with a panel not just of some of the most esteemed judges in the world, but also a panel of some of my good friends in debating as well. Yeah. They'd like to introduce themselves, from, I guess, right to left. Or, yeah, you can go.
Hi, Pranav, Hide, congrats, good luck.
Hi, Leauren, Beta, congratulations and good luck.
Hi, my name is Shaurya. My preferred pronouns are none. Good luck for the debate, and I use actual sentences.
Hi, I'm Ruth, Selorme, she, her, all the best.
And it's not just an honor to be judging with some of the best judges in the world, but also to be judging some of the best teams in North America today. We'll have them introduce themselves by their name, preferred pronouns, speak for order, as well as their institutions that they want to represent. We'll start with opening government.
Rohan, Kapoor, he, him, no complete sentences, speaking first.
Hi, I'm Bowser. I prefer he, him pronouns, and I'll be the DPM.
We're representing the University of Chicago.
Hello, we are opening opposition from Dartmouth College. I'm Ryan, I use he, him pronouns, I'll be speaking first.
Hi, I'm Madeleine, I'll be speaking second, and I go by she, her pronouns.
Hey, Eli speaking first, he, him.
Meg speaking second, she, her, hers. We go to Cornell. Woo.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Matt. I use he, him pronouns, and we go to Yale.
Maddie, she, her, and I also go to Yale.
Awesome. So with that being said, that concludes the introductions. The motion is this House opposes New Optimism. The Grand Finals of 2023 NAUDC begin.
Before I start, I'd just like to thank a couple of the people who helped us get here. To Nish, Grant, and Zoe, thank you so much for being here, watching us, driving us here. To all the teams in the grand final, you're all great friends, and we respect you a lot as debaters. Thanks for being here, and thanks for what's going to be a great round. To everyone watching, thank you so much for showing up to watch finals. After so much online debating, it's really refreshing to see people in person watching debate again. To all the judges, thank you so much for being here. This activity is not possible without you guys.
You're welcome.
What?
You're welcome.
This activity is not possible without you guys, and we really, really do appreciate it. And finally, to Bowser, this has been a lot of fun. Let's do this. And to Bates for running an excellent tournament. I always do that. All right. Hello? Does that work? Might do that. Hello? Yeah. Much like Bowser and I at this tournament, we think that humanity has peaked. What do we oppose inside God? We think that we oppose the ideology of New Optimism itself, both retroactively, that it was not some sort of luck, some sort of destiny that we got here in the first place, but also proactively, that the things that got us here will not work into the future. But secondly, that the belief in this ideology in and of itself is harmful. It makes people complacent and makes them not fight for the change that we want them to. The first argument we're going to give you is that New Optimism is factually bullshit. The first reason under this is that random luck is what got humanity here. The only reason that humanity is here right now is because one Russian admiral made the lucky decision to not press the button on a nuclear war during the Cold War. That is the only reason we even exist right now, and that humanity has not been declared into a nuclear wasteland. We think that the vast majority of scientific advancements that have made humanity come to where they are just like accidents of happy circumstance. That we are like lucky to have had things like penicillin, which has saved billions of lives, but has nothing to do with the systems that we have set up in place, but rather just one person who discovered a petri dish with something in it. The second thing we're going to tell you is that capitalism and globalization have been extreme forces of evil in the world that we exist in right now. Firstly, globalization has created a homogenization of culture where Western society and Western imperialism has imported its goods and its products and its culture into the developing world. This has led to an erasure of the human identity and the culture of indigenous people, which is what we think makes us human. Which means that even if they can point to random economic indicators going up in the future, that is not what the metric of this debate should be judged on. This should be judged on the erasure of human identity and the culture of lived experiences and cultures of people that are not there anymore. But specifically, capitalism has led to a huge amount of specialization in the labor markets right now. This leads to a huge alienation of people from the goods and services that they produce. This means that people spend 8 to 10 hours a day working on goods and producing goods and services that they never see the value of, that they are never able to purchase, and that they never understand what they are doing in the world right now. They are alienated from their labor and spend the vast amount of time doing these things. But thirdly, we don't even think humanity is going to make it in the future. We think that there are two key existential threats to humanity as it stands right now. Firstly, climate change. We think that it is already killing the vast majority of people in the developing world. We think entire islands and countries are being put underwater by the fact that you have huge amounts of global warming melting the ice caps and making sure that these islands don't exist. I don't think anyone on our bench is going to dispute that the climate change exists. But know that the existence of climate change flies in the face of everything that human history tells us and that everything that New Optimism tells us. There's two reasons for this. The first reason is that there are no solutions to climate change that do not involve dismantling the systems of global capitalism that the world lives under right now. It is only through degrowth and through deindustrialization that it is even possible for us to produce and stop resources and stop climate change in the first place. This is because we can never have infinite growth from finite resources that exist on this planet Earth, which means that this Earth is insalvageable by the systems of capitalism that has brought us here. But secondly, we think that AI is likely to just kill all of humanity anyway, which means none of this matters. Why is this the case? We think that alignment is an extremely hard and impossible problem to solve because the loss function that you train AI on can never be perfectly determined to be aligned with humanity's incentives, given that humanity has a huge and varied interest which can never be represented by one mathematical function. This means that it is very hard to create proper AI convergence and AI alignment in the first place. This means what you get on the other side of the house is you just get a huge amount of instrumental convergence to optimize for things like paperclips in the future, which means that the AI and the artificial general intelligence that comes into existence in the future and is already on its prototypes coming into the existence with the advent of things like large language models and ChatGPT mean that there is very unlikely for us to have that there will be both a being with the incentive because it's trying to optimize for paperclips or something else inane that doesn't agree with humanity's values, and the capability because it can literally hack into every single computer in the world and has like absolutely infinite access to the world in the first place, which means that AI is likely to destroy humanity in the first place. But fifthly, even if economic growth has happened, none of this matters because humanity has a huge benchmarking problem in how we view what is good and bad about us. This is because we always adapt to the pleasure that we get as humanity, which means that even if the quality of life has gotten better, you don't judge yourself based on this. You judge yourself based on your peers and the kind of circumstances you live in. This means that even if there is economic growth, you don't feel the benefits of the economic growth because evolutionarily, we don't actually see that because everyone else is also getting richer. This means that the only metric by which you can judge human happiness and human fulfillment in the future is by inequality, which has historically gotten far, far worse, which means that the people who are the worst off are told both that their life circumstances have improved, but they see that there are just way more people who are better off than them, and this hurts far more than any meaning material goods that can help them in the first place. The second thing we're going to tell you is that the belief itself is harmful. Before that, do you have a POI? Okay.
Objectively, the world has gotten better. And the reason it's gotten better is because human problems can be solved through human solutions. That's what New Optimism champions.
Yes, but those problems don't get solved on your side, as my second argument is going to tell you. But even if those problems are solved, they're solved asymmetrically for those living in the West, for who are able to benefit from the systems of global capitalism you set up, which hurts the people who are the most well off, least well off, even more on your side of the house. The second argument we're going to give you is that the belief in new optimism itself is harmful. Firstly, we think a degree of pessimism is important to have retain. The reason for this is the only reason humanity can continue to exist is we need to prevent tail events. We need to prevent the small probability events, but which can become large probability events of things like AI doom, of climate change, of nuclear war, and other sorts of these small risks, but are like kind of tail events, but also very likely to kill us if we don't deal with them. When you have this belief in new optimism, you think that these problems will just resolve themselves and don't fix them. But secondly, we think that new optimism harms and gives you no reason for improvement, right? Maybe there is a belief in the system. We don't think that, we think a belief in the system working is bad. We think that you need to relentlessly change the status quo and work for developments to even get the kind of change and the human solutions that Oppenheimer so greatly desires. The last argument we're going to tell you is that we think that the things that got us here in the first place, that they have to advocate for, will not work in the future. We think the two biggest tools of how we think two of the main things that they will talk about are about democracy and about technology. We think democracy doesn't work because A, the vast majority of countries have democratized. It is not a solution that will work ever again in the future. But also democracy is going backwards now due to things like corporate capture and corporate lobbying. With the increasing degree of inequality, the power of corporations to lobby over democracies is increasing, which means human rights and those things are engaging in huge amounts of backsliding. But secondly, technologies are getting worse. We think that they're creating automation which is replacing human workers, is replacing human productivity, which means that only the richest people who own the technologies can continue to have this money in the future, not the workers who work for it. It is not technology, it is not labor enabling. We're very proud to stand in opening government.
Before I begin, a few quick thank yous as well. First, Debates for running a truly fantastic and wonderful tournament and for making this perhaps one of the most accessible and inclusive Naudcs, at least as I understand it, in history. Thanks to everyone here on stage for what I'm sure will continue to be a fantastic debate, and a huge thanks, of course, to Maddie for being the very best of partners and very much helping our team in so many ways. Opening government is right. The world faces powerful problems in the form of climate change, artificial intelligence, and rising inequality. New Optimism does not refute that. What New Optimism emphasizes is the belief that institutions, that governments, that universities, that structures established to protect rights, to facilitate innovation, to expand the quality of life, are the reason why today we have the lowest rates of child mortality in history, why global poverty, even if inequality is higher, are absolutely lower, why lifespan is now at all-time global highs. The world faces problems. New Optimism doesn't deny that. The question is how we solve those problems, and New Optimism says that working within the system and trusting in human optimism is the way to go. Two contributions to opening opposition. First, what does this narrative mean for institutions, for politics, for policymaking, and how do we deal with the very real pressing challenges opening government identifies? Secondly, what effect does this narrative have for truth, for individual people, and for the way that we derive meaning in life? First argument on institutions. Opening government says that pessimism is the way to go, but pessimism cannot work, because absent the narrative of New Optimism, it is very easy to see the world as an unending story of misery. You see poverty, you see war, hopelessness, genocide, and it is very easy to assume that all of the institutional factors that led to those problems were, in a sense, inevitable. That the reason the world has gotten worse is because that is the destiny and the fate of the world. New Optimism, then, does several important things. The first that it does is it counters that crushing sense of hopelessness and provides us with a real sense that things can get better and that change is possible. And importantly, the way that New Optimism is messaged, the way people understand it, the way it's taught in schools, the way it's internalized in political discourse emphasizes that change is not inevitable, change must still be fought for, but that the end outcome of that fighting will yield productive results. And that matters, because creating change, whether that's combating inequality or ending climate change, necessarily that is a difficult and bumpy path. There are failures along the way, the movement doesn't succeed, you lose the election. The question is how you convince people to continue fighting for change and giving people a genuine faith that things can and will and have historically gotten better is the best way to empower that sense of change. But more importantly, it's because under our side we empower faith in institutions. The greatest threats facing humanity are human problems, and the solutions to them are human solutions. That requires working within the very powerful and real and potent institutions constructed to deal with things like runaway artificial intelligence and rampant global inequality. The problem under their side is exactly what Rohan concedes, that there is a deep distrust and nihilistic attitude towards institutions. That means you work outside the system. That necessarily destines you for failure, not only because institutions can and have historically made the world a better place, but working outside the system often makes things much worse. It means that you get radical violence and infighting on the streets. It means that the problems of inequality simply become worse when the rich justify oppression of the poor on the basis of inequality and rampant violence running amok. What that therefore means is that working within the system is the best solution we have to creating real change, and we empower that under our side of the house in a way that opening government and closing government by extension disempower it. Secondly, what this sense of new optimism does, pragmatically, is orthogonally counteracts regressive sense of nostalgia. Perhaps the biggest problem facing human institutions is the fact that many people genuinely believe the world used to be better. This is opening government's case line, in case you didn't notice it. But the problem is that when people say the world used to be better, they're not making the Marxist arguments that Rohan is making. They're saying the world of the 1960s was a better place than the United States. They're saying we need to make America great again. They're saying that things used to be better in the good old days. The problem is that nostalgia for the status quo is by its nature regressive. It's true that inequality is worse today than it was in the past, and it's true that there are many new forms of oppression. It is also true that we have now more than ever before powerful institutions devoted to protecting human rights. And the problem under their side is that the relapse into nostalgic attitudes that things used to be better is precisely what empowers democratic backsliding, what makes it easier to justify rolling back vital rights protections for minority groups to say that the status quo used to be good. Opening government is right to say that capitalism and globalization have done profound harm for many people in the world. But absent new optimism, the counterfactual is not a Marxist utopia envisioned by Bousseau. It is more plausibly a conservative world governed by comparatively more conservative interests. But thirdly, opening government neglects the explanatory power of new optimism. New optimism is not prescriptive in the sense that it says the world has gotten better and therefore will continue to get better. New optimism, by its nature, must explain why the world has gotten better. That's important in several ways. First, it's important because it mitigates the power of the opening government case. It's worth noting that new optimism as a theory does not necessarily champion things like capitalism or property rights or globalization. It is merely a possible justification for the narrative of new optimism. Opening government's case doesn't engage with the heart of the motion. But more importantly, it's because the explanations offered via new optimism theory is precisely what encourages people to do things like take to the streets and fight and protest and rally for change. And more importantly, it's because on both sides of the house, you acknowledge and see quantitatively and statistically and observationally that the world has become a better place. Absent new optimism, the question of why the world has become a better place is left unanswered, and the alternative solutions proposed are much more likely to provide a harsh characterization of why the world has gotten better as being one of the very opposite of the end goals opening government is striving for. Before moving on, closing.
So inevitability is on both sides. Don't you have a positive inevitability the world will get better, and therefore access your same mechanism of doing absolutely nothing?
The problem is that when you believe inevitably the trend of human existence is towards pessimism, as is the likely extent of cognitive biases for negativity, the presumption is that problems are so overridingly powerful that your participation means little, and that when you lose the election, you will take to the streets and fight and protest because democracy is dead. We counteract that under our side of the house. Second argument, let's engage with the truth debate and what this narrative means for individual people. Clearly, no team can claim epistemologically with absolute certainty whether the world has objectively gotten better or has objectively gotten worse. That's probably not where the heart of this debate is. But intuitively, the world has gotten better over time, in large part because of institutions. We didn't get modern medicine by random luck. We got it because we established institutions, universities, structures that empowered and enabled scientific research. And those institutions are key to solving the problems opening government outlines. But more importantly, what does this narrative do for individual people? Perhaps most importantly, it provides a very real sense of hope. Maybe not hope in the sense that every day you wake up and say, aha, new optimism, yay, but rather it is very real to look around the world and feel like things are inevitably getting worse and to feel hopeless about that yourself. Not just in the sense of how you vote or how you engage in political protest, but in the sense that it very much seems like everything around you is nihilistic. We counterbalance that. But more importantly, The human experience is shaped by perspective. We make decisions based upon what we understand as being true and the world that we live in and grow up in. The problem is that by nature, the human experience is temporally short. You only live for some 80-odd years if you're lucky. And the problem is that you lose a real sense of perspective. What New Optimism provides you is not just a sense of how much better things have gotten, but more importantly, an explanation for why. The biggest issue facing people's lives is an inability to place their decisions in context. New Optimism gives you that context and reminds you of how much better things have gotten. Therefore, we oppose.
Can you hear me like this?
Quick question.
Yes.
Sorry, just a quick question. There's an echo going on right now, because I think that device is currently unmuted.
On the live stream.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if that's something we want to deal with or if it's totally fine.
My mouth was also fine.
It's better.
Yeah, yeah. Can you try speaking again?
Hello.
Yeah, all good, right? Okay, yeah.
Okay, I can start, right?
1 second, let me just check really quickly. Yeah, nice.
I can start now. Everyone's ready, right? Just very quickly, Bates, great tournament. Rohan, great partner. Wish we can debate him together more in the future, but you're graduating, very sad. Old friends, Maddie and Matt, it's nice to debate with you guys for the 10,000th time, and I'm glad I made a bunch of new friends as well. A society that believes in new optimism is a society that excludes facts that don't align with its new optimism narrative. Civil rights in the status quo is championed as something that has progressed throughout history. But what gets disregarded is the fact that there are more black people incarcerated today in the United States than there were slaves prior to the Civil War in the 1860s. Maybe America got better over time as capitalism developed its railroads and brought economic growth to the average American family. But surely America did not get better for the Native Americans who were wiped out by genocide when the Western colonists first got there. New optimism might be true for some people, but it means excluding the people's lives who did not get better. It is an inherently exclusive narrative. But moreover, we also say more perniciously that new optimism entails a blind belief in the future. New optimism is championed by the people who argue that climate change will be solved by economic growth and economic growth alone. Or if it isn't solved by economic growth, it will solve itself eventually. Therefore, solutions about climate change are voted down. The way here is very simple. It's sort of like the Fermi's paradox, right? Because if new optimism exists, then the worst case for government bench is some money is wasted on degrowth. But if new optimism exists, then but if new optimism doesn't exist, then the worst case for opposition bench is catastrophic events like climate change never get prevented. That's why new optimism is a belief that people shouldn't believe in. First, let's talk about the individual. We think the individual is likely to map new optimism into their belief of life as well, right? Because if they think the world is getting better, they're going to think that their life is getting better and better. This belief is not only mapped onto the individual, but reinforced by the fact that for the first 25 years of life, life is getting better and better and better and better. This is because you get educated in those years. You make friends. The corporate ladder is relatively easy to climb because it's a pyramid, so when you're at the bottom, it's easier to advance the first step and the next step and the next step. Thus, most people believe that their life will get better than better. This is why they spend the majority of this discretionary income. They do not save for retirement and the potential of a rainy day because they believe that that day will never come insofar as their life progresses linearly towards the future. They don't do things like take care of their own body and not go to that party because they believe that the decisions they take when they're 25 won't impact them when they're 55. What happens then? On their side of the house, when rainy days do inevitably happen, albeit not to everyone, but a specific minority of individuals, those people are messed over. In the status quo today, more than 50% of Americans cannot cash a $400 check in response to a rainy day that hits them. This is obviously bad because minimizing the harm of rainy days outweighs maximizing the benefits of happy days insofar as there's diminishing margin of returns of happiness. In terms of rainy day, you are screwed over. Note that this argument about individual saving and individual life decisions outweighs their argument on hope, for the very simple reason that hope is something that you feel elusively. You can feel good in other ways, but if you now need a medical procedure that you never saved for because you only thought your life was going to get better and better, that pain is inescapable. Whereas the momentary nihilism that humans experience can be solved with other things, like from playing video games or talking to a partner or things of that sort, right? With that in mind, then, the second thing I want to talk about is give responses to the case we just heard from the LO. The first thing I want to respond to is that it is important to note that the incentive to improve one's life and self-preservation is symmetric to both sides of the house. Therefore, given that those things are symmetric, what New Optimism tells people is to take those things for granted. It is to take that self-preservation and improving one's life as something that will be handed to you because it is deterministic. On our side of the house, we think because those incentives to preserve oneself and to improve one's life still exist, people will use other means to get there, right? People will not have blind faith in their institutions. People will think of saving up because they know that their life isn't always an upward trajectory. The second response I have towards their case is their idea of working in a system is problematic for two reasons. One, Rohan explains to you why those systems that have worked in the past are going to get corrupted in the future by things like AI and by things like corporate capture. The important thing to note here is that previously, all of human innovation made the lives of workers more pleasant. So like, for example, protected machinery made the lives of co-workers a lot better if they had technology to breathe through. But the problem now is that AI has uniquely reached an inflection point when all future AI enhancements don't enhance the ability of the laborer to become more productive, but replace the laborer entirely. So even New Optimism has worked in the past, it won't work in the future. But second, we think criticism empowers the institutions that they say are critically important, no pun intended, because pessimism towards institutions is what leads the people to be internally vigilant. It's what leads people to find the faults in the status quo. It's what leads people to believe things like critical race theory, and that the epoch of America is not perfect, but that the American institution has flaws in it, and that we need to fix it. Lastly, they say it's about make America great again. Note that this make America great again argument cuts both ways, right? Because New Optimism is also prescribed by capitalism. It means more and more capitalism on their side of the house, if it means more and more conservatism on our side of the house, right? So we think this argument cuts both ways at best. But we also just think that like, this is just an argument by example. It's not entirely true as to why the majority of non-New Optimism is a reversion to that house, right? Because like, the important thing to note here is New Optimism doesn't say a rejection in New Optimism doesn't say 60 years ago was better. It says the improvement is possible, but improvement is not given to us. It needs to be taken by us. With that in mind, then, before I move on,
degrowth, yes or no?
Yes. If that's your extension, I'm sure Maddie can preempt it. Go, Maddie, this is your job. Okay, now I'm going to explain to you why, objectively speaking, humanity likely didn't get here because of New Optimism. The premise for this is very simple. Birth is arbitrary, right? We've heard this argument 1,000 times. The sperm that wins out in the race to ferment the egg is entirely arbitrary. Your birth is arbitrary. All other people's birth is arbitrary. Everyone you meet is similarly arbitrary. Therefore, if we believe the very intuitive premise that human potential is determined by nature and nurture, and nature is entirely arbitrary, then a lot of things about human history will just become completely arbitrary, right? If Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison were the same named people, but a different sperm won out in the egg race, it is unclear as to why the light bulb would have been invented. If MacArthur was the president after World War II, and he could have been because he was the commander of the Pacific Fleet after World War II, maybe we would have nuked China during the Korean War and led to nuclear catastrophe much sooner. Their intuitive response to this is, well, this is impossible. Insofar as if everything is arbitrary, then how do we get here, right? It's a 1 in infinite chance. The response to that potential response is like, this is why we haven't found aliens yet, right? Like the fact that we exist in the status quo is completely arbitrary, and yes, it is a 1 in 1 billion chance, and we are precisely that 1 in 1 billion chance, and that chance is likely to be ruined in the future if we don't take care of the present. The last thing in my speech, and very briefly, is why this leads to more wars. After the Cold War, people like Francis Fukuyama decided to argue that democracy would be the end of human history. This is a problematic take on the status quo because it justifies countries like America fighting more wars, because they believe as if the status quo will only get better, and that everything they do into making bad actors better in the status quo is justified because in the future there will all be democracies and kumbaya. He was wrong. Had America believed that democracy would not be the end of human history, they would have accepted that some authoritarian regimes would exist on both sides, which means that they wouldn't have waged wars in the first place to get rid of them, which ultimately failed. For these reasons, very popular.
Just to check, can I be heard?
No. Could you move the mic a bit lower?
Can I be heard now?
Wait, is the mic not working or something? We can't hear you.
The mic, it's the mic on.
Oh, now it's working.
Can I be heard now? So before I start, I'll do the standard things. Thank you, Base, for hosting this tournament, for making it one of the most inclusive ones that has been since recent history. Thank you to Ryan specifically, but unlike Bowser, I'll be debating with Ryan for hopefully quite a while. Thank you to the judges, to everyone sitting here on this table. I'm sure everyone was great and we'll have a fun debate. And thank you to Dartmouth Debate, who is over there, to all three of them and the rest who have left, who have bought me food this whole weekend, and for Ayush, who has to drive later, 4 hours to get back to Dartmouth in the middle of the night.
Love you, Ayush.
The first thing I want to do is talk about what this debate is and is not about. Because New Optimism doesn't claim a monopoly on truth, but instead identifies an observable fact that most elements of the human condition has indeed improved, and attempts to find answers. That's why New Optimism is not synonymous with terms like globalization or Adam Smith capitalism, but instead offers a plurality of explanations that different individuals can internalize and adopt. But immediately, this powerfully answers the heart of the OG case. Their argument is that the world has gotten worse in a multiplicity of ways, but New Optimism as a theory accounts for those negative trends and attempts to identify the institutional and societal mechanisms through which we alleviate those trends on our side. OG's case assumes New Optimism is prescriptive. That isn't true. This is a descriptive theory which advances the pursuit of knowledge and offers answers to questions people will ask on either side of the house. The question is, how do individuals receive that message and what are they going to do in response to it? The first question I would like to ask is, has the world become a better place and will it become a better place in the future? This is what the OG claims in their PM speech. Firstly, the fact that we have birth lottery and arbitrary choices which have created our current world, so it is entirely unclear what the future will hold. Firstly, it is our common reality that we cannot decide where we are born and whether in 50 years a meteorite will hit our planet. But we have made huge strides towards trying to reverse or mitigate harms like the birth lottery. The fact that you have things like affirmative action policies, funding for disadvantaged communities. You have NGOs and organizations in the poorest areas of our planet trying to give those people a sense of hope. While these are imperfect solutions right now, it isn't a reason to believe that this world is going to go down in flames and lives are not worth living in the future. Second, they claim that there's accidental happiness and lucky scientific discoveries, which mean that this is why our world is better. Luck cannot explain the vast explosion of technology and medicine and human welfare in the last 2 centuries. Maybe it was the case for Newton and his inspiration, but we have some level of scientific basis right now that you can actively build on through research and through experimentation, highly factually incorrect. Thirdly, capitalism and globalization, which has homogenized culture and harmed certain groups. In fact, it is the opposite. Globalization has enabled cultural diffusion and a sharing of identities. When you listen to other cultures' music, we read other people's books, we talk online with people from other countries, we attend debate tournaments with debaters across all 3 countries in North America today. Fine, maybe the most marginalized people face some level of harm in some cases, but our argument is that we are often actively trying to rectify those harms right now. The fact that Native Americans can talk about their struggles on social media, the fact that their voices are able to be celebrated on a wider platform. Identity is meaningful, but it is also incredibly meaningful when the identity can be spread online for other individuals to also appreciate, which is what we get on our side of the house. The fourth thing that OG talks about is global warming and climate change that will screw all of us over. But OG mischaracterizes the New Optimism here. It's not that we must say capitalism is good because it created global warming, but rather that the trend of human society is towards improvement, even when that trend creates new issues. Our claim is that things are getting genuinely better. The Paris Climate Accord is creating change, like the US just passed its greatest act of environmental legislation ever. Structurally, we are going to solve or at least mitigate the harms we face with climate change. Technological innovation can produce these solutions to take carbon out of the atmosphere. A progressive bloc of voters are pushing for pro-green agendas, and many people care about their children and their future grandchildren, which is why it is often a top voting issue and is going to become increasingly a top voting issue into the future when it comes to things like environmental protection. Companies are also engaging in shareholder activism. CF like engine number 1 in ExxonMobil. All of this shows that it is not doomsday just because global warming exists and climate change is potentially getting worse. We show you can actually reverse it or at least live with it in some sense. Fifthly then, fine, AI will kill all of humanity so it doesn't matter. Let's flip this claim. If it is true that people genuinely believe they will not live long or that in the future the world will go down in flames, it is more likely the rational calculus is that one optimizes the current benefit. Why is this so bad? So you engage in large amounts of advanced machine learning we have not yet discovered, with little regulation and account less than the human cost right now. You enter into a hasty transition process which actively increases the magnitude of harm to people living right now who cannot adapt to a new technological transition that they have to deal with. On our side, if you believe you have to live with AI, you are more likely to want to mitigate the harm on our side and do the research in order for you to achieve that. So it is far more likely our world is more sustainable and individuals can live better lives in the long run. What is our claim then? Our claim is that the most important impact in this debate is not about the truth of new optimism. That backlash will always be mired in uncertainty. The world has been made better in some ways and worse in others. What is much more important is how we solve these pressing problems that OG describes. The problem that is pessimism turning people away. We have evolved to develop a cognitive focus on the negative as a survival mechanism. Therefore, negative thoughts drive us away, and pessimism turns people away from reform movements. The alt response is, no, but happiness and satisfaction is relative. People are therefore unhappy even if they live objectively better lives. No, people live far longer lives than they did in the past. Perhaps people's quality of life in some sense has gotten worse, but happiness doesn't mean anything to be dead. It's to people who suffer from famine or poverty or war or destitution to a significantly greater level on their side of the house. The fact that war was also more likely and more deadly on their side of the house if you compare the past to like 200 or like 200 years in the medieval age compared to right now. All of this just means that it is untrue that just because relativity exists, it means that people still are less satisfied and live worse lives. I'll take closing.
This is a narrative motion. Who tells you this narrative? Who tells you why this is going to happen?
So, given the current decentralization of information and the ability for individuals to share information, there's greater discourse of individuals deciding what this narrative actually looks like. Fine, you can talk about corporate capture and politicians having bad incentives, but the reality is during the 21st century, you have things like social media. You have individuals who genuinely care about the well-being of other people who want to spread this narrative. Highly unengaging question. Secondly, the response we get is progress benefits one group but comes at the cost of another, for example, Native American indigenous communities. This is true in the short term, but incorrect in the long term, because the pie grows over time and economic growth makes people better off. Maybe you believe that the purity of culture is the most important, but for those individuals who access things like education, clean drinking water, to make sure your children can live for longer, I dare you to say that that is not something these individuals care about. Secondly then, how does pessimism play in this round? I want to note this really importantly, because it isn't the same on both sides. An individual can be relatively optimistic, but they can remain cynical. Why is this the case? And why do individuals still care about current struggles and want to push for change? Because if you are someone right now who's struggling to feed your family, if you don't know whether or not your mother can survive in the current healthcare system, this is an immediate struggle and immediate concern you have, irregardless of whether you believe in the long run the world will get better. So you still have an impetus to currently push for change. What you need is a level of criticism and cynicism and not what they say. But in fact, on their side of the house, those are the individuals who now no longer feel like they're able to make change within the system. And even when they do, you create pressure, you don't have pressure valves, which means that individuals often explode in certain moments to go against institutions, and all of the worst ones that Ryan tells you about violence and war materialize.
Just give me like 1 sec to move this stuff around. This is like a very...
We use this.
Okay. Sorry, what? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm gonna move it back. I just need to like...
You can use this.
You know... Hold on.
I mean, it might be like a little hand.
Yeah, I might actually like...
Actually, like...
Okay. So, this here, I think this would be enough space. And then this would be last. Okay, if these papers get out of order, then you're all going to have to reorganize yourselves. All right. Good. Good panel. Anybody not ready? Cool. How's this? How's this? Good. Speak of no. Good. Good. How about now?
No.
Okay.
No.
Better.
You'd be exceptionally close to Eli.
You have to get like really close.
Yeah, I think it's very unidirectional.
Just get put it here. Panel, it's not just the lie, but who tells it.
Here, here.
We think the thing that is missing in this entire debate is a characterization of where this narrative comes from. Because it's not just a belief about the future. It's an ideology. It's a system, a worldview that is pushed by certain actors onto others. We think it's controlled by the rich and powerful in society. We think it's a mechanism of telling everybody else to sit down, shut up, and let them run the future. Very simple extension from us why this is, again, controlled by the powerful, why that's really bad. Before this, I just want to say two things on opening opposition's point on institutions, which is, firstly, institutional involvement is worse if you are more optimistic about the future, because you think your individual actions have a higher chance of succeeding insofar as most individual actions succeed because, human progress is happening. Look, we're all doing really good things in society. Comparatively, if you think there are massive issues, if you think you're probably going to fail, and the only chance of that, in the face of this, pessimism-inducing, overwhelming harm, is that you need to band together because you're each individually too weak, is that you need institutions that magnify your power, institutions like the state. You are much more likely to work within those things insofar as, again, all of these things are ways that you can get broader change. Secondly, because you need increased fear to preserve institutions insofar as they're failing right now because of a decrease in US hegemony, which is the reason why you had all this collaboration, right? Setting up things like the UN, setting up things like the WTO, massive collaboration across regions because there was only one power that can enforce that. The point at which people respond to this positively, try and preserve those institutions, think that they need to work together more multilateral deals, all of those things, is the point at which they have a greater fear about it, so they overcome the barriers, like not wanting to work with countries that they dislike, like not wanting to work with political parties that they're slightly afraid of, right? You need that fear to incentivize them to take that leap. Who controls this narrative? Beginning the extension. We would say it's probably the rich and powerful in society, insofar as they, first of all, control the majority of the media in society, but also, secondly, insofar as they directly have other capacities to advertise this belief, right? So they can do things like fund political canvassing on this, which literally happens in Northern California, so they can fund advertisements, so they can fund university lectures and books. DLO says you decentralize it. No, the problem is the rich can overwhelm this decentralization because they have the capacity to do things like fund all of those, people who are talking about this on the internet, create massive bot networks that can support this. And I would say this is unique to this narrative. There's a reason why they specifically do this on this narrative, not others, which is, firstly, that this says their rule is positive, right? Because the richest and most powerful people in society are the ones who preserve the status quo and have benefited from it. So they're the ones who want to tell you that things are getting better, right? Because they're doing a good job. Secondly, because it directly tells you, don't change the current order. Things are getting better. The course of human progress is positive because we're in charge. So anything you do to destabilize us is putting human progress fundamentally at risk. What does this mean they do? They say we're solving these things. They say specifically their programs are solving it, right? The NGOs they've created, you don't need to work outside those. They say it's bad to challenge them actively. And we would say, even if opposition wants to say that they'll do it poorly, or that they'll do it well, the issue is often they do it really poorly. First of all, because they want their power to be preserved. So their direct incentive is to lie to you, to exaggerate the extent to which things are good so that you don't challenge them. Because often they are the ones who've created the problems because they're the ones who are in power and control these institutions. But secondly, because they're often arrogant about the degree to which optimism is correct, since they're the ones who made the change. So when it's your corporation that's on the line, you of course think you did a good job. And I would note also here, this already fills in the massive hole in opening government on whether or not personal actions, specifically in DPM, occur. Because this is the only reason, in terms of the narrative being distributed through media, why people actually take action. The second thing that we'll tell you here is just what the counterfactual is, which is that it's probably not pessimism. It's a view of progress in which progress is more varied. Why? Firstly, cognitive bias, right? Ello asserts this. They say people are naturally pessimistic. No mechanism here. The reason why it's more varied is that is how life works, right? There are ups and downs in life. You experience certain things that are good and certain things that are bad, so you track the way that you understand your own internal world onto the rest of the world because it's the only reference you have. Secondly, because there's an aggregation effect. Some people's lives are better, some are worse. There are different times in which different people are good and different people are bad, and when you put those people together to create a social narrative, it tends to even out, so you get a view of the world in which things are more balanced. Why is this not controlled by the rich and powerful? Firstly, because it admits that they make a ton of mistakes, right? So they don't have the incentive to advertise this stuff, try to push this stuff on other people, insofar as this allows minorities to critique them. It allows them to say, your rule is bad, we need to do things about the massive problems, right? Things like globalization and automation. Secondly, because the powerful have already committed to new optimism. So they don't switch over now, right? They probably still push optimism. We just think it is good if other narratives exist, right? That's what we stand for. Anything from the top?
Presumably, when elites have selfish interests, the narratives they construct reinforce power. In the absence of such a narrative, then, most people have a strong likelihood of looking at the world and seeing the negative moments because we've evolved that way to survive. That means under your side, pessimism does dominate.
You don't see the negative moments exclusively because you also see positive moments that happen in your life. Like literally, both of them happen to you. To whatever extent you see negative ones, then maybe, you know, I don't know, like some of your cat dies, then the next day you have a really good meal and you're like, oh, not everything in life. Okay, why is new optimism massively disempower social movements? Three very obvious reasons. One, division and infighting, because some people are hurt by automation, because some people are unlucky, their countries are resource-y, like not rich, because there's discrimination against them as reactions to globalization make people go more internal into their groups. OO says there's hope. No, at the point where people tell you that things are getting better, but you don't see that in your lived reality, you think these other people aren't on your side and are actively against you because they refuse to admit the basics of your life. Secondly, because there is a belief that the powerful will make change for you, because they sell this, because they make it about them, right? Because they want to discourage action because that could challenge or disrupt their power. Thirdly, because of arrogance, right? Because if always like the world is getting better, then there's less risk of the world going off course, and so it's not as important. This is very important because there are costs that exist to checking mechanisms. You need more money for AI research, restrain corporations on climate change, put yourself in the line to protest. You don't do this if you think it's irrelevant because the world's getting better long term. OO says there's human solutions. This is a unique reason why people don't engage in them. What's the impact? Real quick. Three things. One, there's more action on our side, specifically at the bottom, which is really important because the rich and powerful don't focus on everything because it doesn't always affect them, but the things that affect the most vulnerable people only happen if you get more people focused on that. Secondly, trust and belief, because people acknowledge your experience in social movements that have this, and so you get more like working together, right, because there's less distrust. Third, you avoid damaging infighting, right? The reason why like Steven Pinker damages progressive orgs in the West is that you have infighting about whether these groups are ignoring the lived experiences of other groups, and it, like, again, creates massive fissures within those that makes it hard for them to work together, which is really important to people because they see it as essential to their identity. Very proud to propose.
Cool, can you hear me? Yeah? This. Awesome. I want to say a few quick things in the interest of being sappy. A lot of people helped us get here. Literally helped me get here. Yale and the Yale Debate Association, thank you so much. Really good to see you in the audience, and thanks to Yale back home as well. Much love. In a broader sense, helped me get here. My family, my coaches through high school, David Peterson, Michael Hauge, Logan Fat, and all of Team China. That network back there is very important to me. All of my previous partners, people that I've had the luck to debate with, those who can't be here today, family members, loved ones, and Maddie, who agreed to come to me with this, to this tournament, and literally a win, like in 10 minutes time, 1 hour before we left. It's been really great. You are awesome. I hope everyone gets to know Maddie a little better because it's been a pleasure. Did I mention the judges look great today?
We have a call.
Remember the judges through last round.
We're going to win by making two observations. The first is that most of these things do not change the world. The stupid thing about these narrative motions is that most narratives don't do all that much. Most capitalists still have capitalist incentives. They want to get richer. They want to give their children more money. The narrative change there is not that large. Most social movements still have incentives to do this or that for various reasons, because they have very strong organizers in this area, because they have access to this book or that book, because they feel like they were motivated by a particular policy or not motivated by a particular policy. My point is that most things are very chaotic. Most things were not justified well enough in this debate to actually reach any of the impacts discussed. Also, quickly on epistemology, sometimes it's useful to have beliefs that are helpful, even if not true, so even if you buy all of OG. I think that believing in Santa is great, believing that my life has meaning is great, believing that I'm not a bad person is great in many cases. The second observation that I'll make that will help us win this debate is that being able to create technology, even if this is just some people buying into it, being able to believe in a sense of hope allows us to create non-zero-sum games. The huge reason creates the incentive for problems in the status quo. The reason why we're not willing to invest in things like climate change, the reason why we have so much conflict with other nations, is because we have zero-sum games, because we believe that we cannot develop enough. Technology creates surplus, and that creates the ability for us to try to do even better things. So, I'm going to take as given what OG says, which is that climate change is an existential threat. This extension will notably apply to all other existential threats, but here's the framing on existential threats. When you die, you cannot access any other rights. When you die, you cannot access any other benefits. When you die, you don't care much about other principles. And so, given that death is often imbalanced, that some people will access less good life than other people, and given that principles and beliefs go away at the sense of death, we should try to stop existential threat, and any marginal impact on that is going to win us this debate. How do we do that? I'm going to show that we get more individuals supporting the type of research that actually do solve problems. I agree with them that we cannot solve climate change right now, that degrowth is simply not going to work. And if you believe that any of the Gov teams prove that degrowth is going to happen, go ahead and vote for them, but it's still not going to work. Firstly, individuals are more likely to be motivated to go into the sciences and research under our side of the house. I want to be clear, they might get some researchers on their side. The researchers are more likely to be profit motivated because they are people who are either independently wealthy or want to get money out of their degrees. How do you get the highly motivated individuals who research for public good? One, their personal sacrifices, things like writing a dissertation on a subject that does not yet exist, things like entering a PhD program in a speculative field, saying that I believe AI alignment is a very serious problem, or saying that carbon capture can actually be created within my lifetime, requires a lot of risk. You are taking on debt, you are giving up time, you are giving up years of your life. If your mission potentially fails, and you believe that your mission will never succeed, you are not going to take on this risk. We say that there is a huge individual threat to this. The second is a general belief that you have, that others will help you, that they will pick up the work, that they will research you, they will research with you, that there is not a prisoner's dilemma, because no researcher believes that they can do everything on their own. They need to believe that other people will support them, that programs will fund them, that other people will co-write and co-author with them. The third reason is because of the narratives that are promoted. That is to say that these stories that you are told about where your mentors are going, about what types of research were done in the past, and what was possible in the past are highly, highly influential to you. But notably, really smart people can become really, really depressed because they spend all their time thinking about what is possible on the frontiers of their field. If they believe that the frontiers of their field cannot save the world, they are much more likely to become like Eliza Yudkowsky, a very smart alignment researcher who gave up on alignment and believes that we're all going to die. The fourth and final thing is that you need faith before there is reason to have faith. And this is why it is crucial that we have this particular motion. That is, you need to believe that things will be okay without seeing a path like OG identifies that things will be okay. You need to know, for instance, that you believe that carbon capture can be done without knowing that it can be done. Because guess what? You are the only one that can produce the knowledge that does that thing. So, you need these motivated individuals to do the research. Those people are huge impact multipliers, right? A person who figures out how to do carbon capture or how to do very, very efficient solar panels is going to save the world. The second thing is those individuals need funding. They say, well, if we just bond together and all work together, it will solve things. This is a knife of OG because it's our side. If you are saying that when you believe humans all come together and work on a problem, that we will solve the problem, that is literally the opposition side. I want to point out two reasons why we get more funding. The first is politics. That is to say that when people believe there is a zero-sum game in terms of funding, then they are going to fund the thing that they believe will work. That is, if you are going to trade off with welfare or social security or other types of subsidies, decreasing taxes, you need to justify to the public why you are funding research institutions. If people are more likely to believe that it will work, then they are more likely to vote for this funding. I want to note, the margin here is really important because government budgets command billions and trillions of dollars across the world. If you give $10 million to a really good AI lab, if you give $100,000 to give someone a scholarship to study something for 1 more year, that is the marginal chance that you will discover the technology that is necessary. There's a huge political impact there, and we explain the trade-off, unlike what opening opposition says. They just say, oh, well, people need to believe it's going to work. Here is why they need to believe it's going to work, because it trades off with other things in the status quo. The second thing, though, is that research institutions need to believe that it's going to work. They face the same incentive problem that I discussed earlier. That is, they can work on profitable research, things like curing male pattern baldness, curing diseases in the Western world that are guaranteed to give them some money, or they can invest in a legacy. They can invest in being on the frontier of the new future. If they do not believe that that's going to happen, that harms them. Therefore, they're not going to get smart people or funding on their side opening.
Yeah, self-preservation is likely symmetric, so people want to preserve their life on both sides. On your side, you get a collective action problem where people say, because human history has historically progressed, someone else will do the research instead of me, so people don't take individual risks.
No, but the point is that you have to believe that it's likely to work. So if you believe that humanity working together is going to work, then you have the benefit of buying into that legacy, that grand story that you've been told all your life and have a lot of respect for. Under your side of the house, you are less likely to believe that it's going to work, so you're more likely to buy into the individual benefit of, oh, it's probably a lot better for my life if I make a killing in the meantime, either way, because we think that you are not necessarily going to solve things. So we think that more people buy into that narrative on our side. Okay, they say, this will happen anyway. No, because I think that individuals will focus on profit instead, just mentioned. Secondly, the margin of impact matters. If we convince 2 or 3 highly motivated individuals to go into this field, that could be huge and world-changing. Second, they say that people don't believe the problem exists. This is not how the narrative is told. The narrative is told in a way that says that we are constantly making mistakes and fixing those mistakes. When we go through the Renaissance, we don't stop. We go to the Reformation. We don't stop there. We go to the Scientific Revolution, recognizing the mistakes of the past. So we recognize that we're wrong in many cases. Moreover, your side worsens things. The people who have short-term buy-in are the ones who are suppressing information. Why is technology essential? 1, there's no way to solve it on theirs. They don't convince you that degrowth is going to happen. Second, this creates a non-zero-sum game. Even if you had degrowth today, there's already enough pollution to kill us all. The way that you have to do it is taking all carbon out of the atmosphere, by taking away oil profits, by making solar energy so cheap that people have to use it without any political gains. This doesn't require you to believe in other things. This requires you to believe in a few brilliant researchers. For these reasons, we win on opposition.
Thank you. Oh. You can start. Great. Freaking Dupatta. It's going to be my 1 minute stall. Got it. That's longer. Sorry, I'm just trying to find space in this. Yeah, okay. Okay. I've done something. Let's test my audibility. Wow. Yeah. I'm just gonna go with you guys and talk and debate, not as I yell, so I'm just gonna push stuff back. As I have been doing this entire tournament, I also should do my pleasantries. This is actually, finally, I did my last speech. I think this is, and the community has been amazing, and honestly, Seriously wonderful. A few thank yous and then I will move on, I promise. Number one, and most importantly, my family, who I promised in my entire life said they would watch only one speech of mine, sometime. And so this is a speech I'm going to bank on. Please. Amma, Nana, Halavarun, Midana Lekuda, you don't know. I'm just going to keep on that language for now. 2, for Cornell, as well as Rochester, for those who don't know, I began at both universities. I credit both with all work. I say, a child of both, and sometimes rep both at the same time. Thank you both so much. Just being willing to invest in my learning, incredibly important. Almost done, I promise. Last few things, and then over. Finally, to all of my mentors, like all of you know who exist, and also more importantly, to the people who challenge what the norm of debate is, who can debate, I just thank you so much. I don't think that brown women exist in the space so relevantly with the diversity we have, and that we have more stuff to go. It's really important. The spaces that are open by people willing to just be loud and be proud are incredibly important. I think for me, so I could. Last, but nowhere near the least, to Eli. For those who don't know, I actually don't have an answer on this. I think he's been my rock, my friend, one of my closest members, and honestly, the only reason I believe this motion would even work. Like, I'm optimistically surprised. Anything else? Genuinely, at the end of the day, I have never been able to blindly trust someone as much as that, and I've never been able to learn from someone as much as that. I implore you to ask him any questions. I think he's one of the sweetest people ever, and while he cannot drive and is useless in that sense, everywhere else, and that's all that matters. With that being said, that's all good. We're gonna get a change in tone here, so give me a second to grab some water. Let's go. You like me back to that? Oh, before I start, I think it's very important. Last thing. This is Rohan's also his last speech, and I just think we should recognize that because he forgot to. So to Rohan, congratulations. Also, the Op-Whip, fun fact, the Op-Whip, this is their second debate, fucking BP tournament, and I think that's important as well. So, Ryan and I've been debating since 8th grade. I need Ryan to move to Thailand. And so, that, it's always amazing. Fun fact, he's the only person ever who's watched every single one of my rounds. I don't think anybody knows more about me as a debater than Ryan, and I've never had support unlike that. Let's get this. You have been deceived. You've been deceived by every team who, at the end of the day, cannot tell you who told you this narrative, and more importantly, what this narrative explains. It is not just the world is better or problem is solved. It has to be the explanation, even as O says, to get to this. The problem with that, Eli told you who likely controls this narrative and what happens. 2 broad observations that knock out most of the off bench. 1, you don't know when your life is getting better. Like, most importantly, the benefits of the trades or the trends that you see are for significantly long periods of time. Analysis of and CEO about how this uniquely shifts your actor decisions on a daily basis because you see good results does not literally happen because nothing is happening tomorrow. This is why it's incredibly unlikely. 2, individual self-value that OO tries to answer to our POI knocks most of the op bench out. If you are individual, A, the entire case where you're previously cynical, lies here, I don't know why you go read into this new information. B, and more importantly, have literal no collectivization because everyone's interpretation of how you get better is like vastly different. I believe that the way to get better individually is like, I don't know, funding women's rights. Eli believes in like apparently killing cats. Like whatever that is to like solve this, it's literally different. So any sort of solution you want to get from them is improbable. Which means at best, Optimist has told you that hope is the most important thing and catharsis matters. If I can get that out, they are also out of this route. Let's talk through CO. I don't think CO had to respond to our case first of all. They're going to have to do it afterwards, but I don't think they're able to do so. 3 responses to them. First, on research. Note clearly, research is not made out of happiness, it's made out of direct fear. The reason I'm so concerned about climate change tomorrow is that I will die if not that. The reason I care about the trade-off in investment and I prioritize this is based on my fear or assumption that I will actually be
hurt by that. That's why we deprioritize like fun things or things that we don't see as most valuable when making funding trade-off resources. What does this mean? At best, off-benchers explain what's the unique tipping factor. 2, people who are interested in fields likely continue towards them. The best people to do this probably already will, but are already highly motivated, skilled, continue to have these skills. It is a questionable difference here to what is it would enter the market. Finally, I think most of the responses from opening opposition will classify here about institutions working together. At best, they might say you have better research. The problem is, Eli tells you who, the narratives of people in power that control these things, which looks like, for example, research to fixing climate change dependent upon tech companies telling you that the way to do this is building little, igloos or some shit. I don't care what it is, but the point here, though, is that most of the narratives and research for decision-making things you do are going to be based upon those in power trying to enforce you both ways. The problem that Eli tells you with that is that these people are naturally self-interested. Comparatively, when you don't have that, you assume that these things are irrational or can change up and down. 1, a group cannot claim total control over a narrative, and 2, you are cognizant there are actual failures. Rest of responses into the OO case. Into opening opposition, on hope, 7 responses here. First, flipping this thing. No, Eli tells you how things are likely to be perceived in the future. That is, the things are changing based on your preferences. You are proximate towards you. You were happy one day and sad another day based on the preferences of your life, which means it's likely to shift your emotional value. Continuous dread has to be told by somebody. I don't know why I lament on the fact that climate change might not be fixed every single day, and therefore live in existential dread, unable to be happy. I do not know why this is actually going to happen. If not this, here is the issue with the hope argument. Most people don't get to actually see this. I mean, A, change is super slow, but more importantly, change is not visible. Day-to-day growth or changes are either A, not impacting you, B, immeasurable, or C, new problems come up that make priorities. Great, you fix a problem tomorrow, just look at something else the day afterwards. I have no understanding of why you lament or feel genuine joy. It's why you probably have more concerns directly in front of you. You might make a small dent and pray more, but something else will always exist. So I don't know why this is a unique catharsis. What does this do for hope? It means 2 things. 1, when your heart and your day-to-day life are more proximate, you never look back at hope. But more importantly, you probably think this hope doesn't happen anymore because as you wait longer and longer, because very importantly, time frame, God, where? God doesn't know, because I don't know when this hope is actually going to happen. What that does for you, though, is means that you lose out over periods of time. This is the problem. To keep you in the narrative, Eli tells you that people promote really bad shit about themselves. They say things like, this is probably the best way for you to go ahead and collectivize, only if you follow me. So if you want hope, the only people who prescribe this hope are the ones that tell you they know how to fix it. The problem is they don't. Comparatively, Eli tells you that if you allow for individuals to look at this as well as have different preferences and not let one person control the unique narrative, that groups can coalesce together at different values based on the different preferences. This is the unique difference. Yeah.
Narratives begin top-down, but evolve to become bottom-up through conversations in our daily lives. But even if not, elites aren't monoliths. This is a descriptive narrative.
Yeah, but elites are in relative contention. Either A, you have relatively different viewpoints of how things are working out, or B, and more importantly, still preserve themselves. Even at worst case, hope is not proven. At the worst case of our entire extension, we tell you the wrong people are controlling this narrative, and we promote negative actions and what they want to gain, and at a double worst case, are able to explain where you aren't going to get benefits. Second, on explanation. The problem is who explains it. No one is able to tell me why, and this is when you can shift the narrative. You lose out on culpability. Even if nothing else changes, that actually does. What does it mean? It believes that if you believe explanation is good. By the way, Eli is the only one who explains how people know about this. I think all the fundamental facts come out of the MG speech, where he tells you why it is you probably can flip the story. The problem is that you can have a relative demonization of people just blindly follow you, and or it's a struggle to critique the narrative and you don't know what the harm is. What did this mean to the off-bench? It meant 5 simple things. 1, hope is unlikely insofar as there's differing narratives of what this hope looks like, especially the fact that 2, they've argued and apparently agreed that this is diverse and dispersed, in which case there's not a collective narrative that everyone can unify around. 3, that individuals have need to come to this narrative themselves, which is quite ridiculous to assume, it's unlikely to outweigh their own analysis of why it's probably not valued. And D, and most importantly here, at worst case, it allows the elite who already have control to keep having it, and the narrative allows them to get away with grievances. Even if nothing else, it means they can cover their tracks. And the problem is they lie about saying it's the only way they can fix things. That's the 3 to 5 reasons we're able to win. What do we do with opening government? 2 broad things. One, I think the harms pointed out by the PM can be true, but the impact that poor people or like other individuals are sad, which is literally the impact taken from 1 second. Eli actually proves why it happens. It's because individuals have dispersed needs and are unable to explain why this actually shifts. 2, they give you a laundry list of harms with no implications to how this narrative shifts up. Eli tells you that people react. At worst case, this reaction is negative. At best case, we tell you why you don't get changed. Very, very, very happy for the very last time.
Can everyone hear me? Sick. Okay, I'm going to do pleasantries too because I think this is fun. I have not done a lot of BP. I'm super excited to be here. I'm glad I made the choice to come. Thank you to my team for supporting me, for driving the like 5.5 some hours. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you to Matt, of course. I think you've been a phenomenal partner in this tournament. I'm really lucky to have somebody who knows as much about BP as Matt does to help me learn about the event. I also want to say briefly a specific thank you to Madeleine and Meg. I think there are a lot of rounds, especially like I mostly do APTA. I stand in a lot of rounds where I'm like the only gender minority in the round. I think that's really disheartening. It's really exciting for me that even if I give a shit speech, there are other women here who have given excellent speeches. I'm not the only one who has to bear that burden. Cool, is anyone not ready? I'm going to go through this speech, and what I'm going to prove to you is that the answer to all of the harms that that the government teams bring is me. I am the answer. I am the student who's going to solve all of the world's problems. I say this in jest, but not really. I think that broadly, the people who are going to change the world, the people who are going to solve the existential risks that my government team acknowledge face humanity and will likely wipe us out if nothing is done about them, are students. I think that students are the only chance that we have to solve these problems. It's not just institutions more broadly, as my opening team tells you, but it's specifically the university. And the university is going to be really important in this debate because the university trains the kind of people who are going to be able to fix the problems that government tells you will kill us if they don't go fixed. This is by far the most important impact in the debate. I think Matt goes through and he tells you why this is likely to be the case. He's already done the weighing. If everybody dies, if there's a nuclear war, if AI takes over the world, if climate change kills us all, then it doesn't matter. None of this matters. It doesn't matter what our institutions look like. It doesn't matter really, like how long our lifespan is. All that matters is that we are here and that we can continue to innovate. No, thank you. Why do we think that this is the winning extension? First, I want to talk about a couple of responses that we get from closing government. First, they say that research is out of fear, that we need to be scared in order to research. I think that this can coexist with narratives about optimism. I think that optimism doesn't have to mean that we say there aren't any threats. Optimism can mean acknowledging that there are threats, but that we have the potential to fix them. And I want to be clear, you need fear and hope. Only fear does not work. We know that the sun is going to implode in 5 billion years, and it's going to kill us all, but we have no hope of fixing that because it's just like going to happen no matter what. Because we have no hope, nobody spends any time thinking about how we can stop the sun from exploding. What do we spend time thinking about? We spend time thinking about how we can recycle more effectively. We spend time thinking about how we can make pesticides that are more friendly to the environment. We talk about how we can save species that are dying out one by one. We talk about these things because we believe that we can do them. This is why I chose my major. This is why I'm an environmental engineering major. And maybe it's because I'm an idiot. Maybe it's because I think that I can change the world and I have a God complex. But either way, people like me are the only risk of offense in this entire round. That was a little narcissistic. My opponents then tell you that this narrative is only going to be dispersed through and for elites. Why do we think this just isn't a problem? First, if elites are self-interested, they're still going to want to solve these problems. But second, we broadly think that elites are that elites have like god complexes just like me, and that they want to be the hero of the narrative. I think broadly, like if you told Elon Musk that he could save the entire world, he would fucking do it. Elites still want to be the center of these narratives, but like I said, hope is the linchpin in believing that that's possible. If these elites don't have hope, then there's no way that they can engage in this process. And I also think broadly, it isn't likely that it's just going to be elites. My opponents ask you, who tells you these narratives and what are the narratives? They say that we're missing clarity on this. No, thank you. I think we do this very clearly. We tell you that universities and research groups and your peers are going to disseminate these narratives to you. This looks like you having panels where you talk about how students can change the world, how to pick your major to maximize good in the world. This looks like instead of everybody on the YDA working for Bridgewater, maybe people like do something good for the world. I think that broadly, people, specifically students, are very susceptible to these narratives, and they're clearly likely to exist on our side of the house given the motion. Why is this unique to students? First, students have to believe that if this has worked in the past in order for them to buy into it now. We think that uniquely college students are looking for role models. They don't know their place in life. They don't know where they fit in the world. They're looking for people to structure their lives around. If you don't say that human intentionality and human decisions have made these advancements, then they don't have any role models who they can structure this around. They're not going to choose this kind of career in a second. But also, we think that community is really important to students. We think that there's a critical mass that happens here, where if you tell students that optimism is incredibly likely to work, that optimism is going to work, then people are going to take a chance on it, in part because their peers are doing it too. So even if under their house there's like one crazy individual who thinks they can change the world, you don't get enough mass, because you need lots of people believing that they can generate change in the world in order for this to work. I'll take opening.
At the top of MO, Matt points out that societal change delta in this debate is non-existent. Then your extension's impact is that there will be billions of dollars funded into research that would enable students to solve climate change. These two claims can't both be true.
I think it is the case that one innovation is what it takes. So any marginal risk of convincing people to try to solve these problems is a positive delta, right? So I think that insofar as you guys set up the case as this is an existential threat, this is something that is going to wipe out humanity if we don't deal with it, then probably any risk of offense is good. I also tell you, Matt tells you that this narrative isn't going to affect everyone, right? If you're already cemented in your views, if you're already, on a life path that is dictating certain choices for you, this narrative isn't going to be the tipping point, but I can use a unique analysis that I don't think contradicts that at all for why students are likely to buy into this narrative. This isn't that broad of a scope, this is actually a pretty narrow scope. I'm telling you that wide-eyed, excited 20-year-olds, no thank you, are going to be the ones who are going to be particularly receptive to this narrative, because young people want to believe they can change the world. They're cognitively biased to do so because they want to think that they're important, and these young people are the ones who are most likely to be shaped by this narrative. To be clear, I don't think billions of dollars of research funding needs to be the tipping point. I think students buying into this narrative is. Why is this the case? First, because it clearly compounds. I think that if you have lots of students who become academics, who then continue to do this work, clearly there's a recursive effect here, right? So you can generate grant funding. I also think that broadly you can convince people of your ideas, and even if it ends up being the case that you're shouting into the void, at least you have a small group of people who's doing something, which like I said, is the only risk of offense in this round. I also think that there's something that Matt tells you that is probably winning the round separately, which is when he says that believing good things can be good for you, even if they don't lead to concrete outcomes. This is to say that I think that broadly, even if it isn't the case that I change the world, my life is better for believing that I can. I think Matt gives you this analysis when he tells you that hope is cognitively important to people. I think broadly, even in the worst case scenario where we don't have any risk of offense, I think that we're still winning on the idea that believing good things can be good for you. Insofar as it's got no contestation, I think it's pretty clear. How does this win the round? First, OG tells you first that these narratives are wrong. I think this is tangential to the debate. It doesn't really matter if we've been undergoing continuous improvement, if believing that we had is going to change the world. They also tell you that this belief prevents change, but I think through our analysis we showed you why that isn't the case. They also say there's no solutions within the status quo. Again, by raising people to believe that they can change the status quo, that they can innovate, that they can make substantial changes as an individual, this is going to beat this claim. OO tells you that institutions enable this, we make it more specific. This is the winning argument in this debate. Thank you.
Manuel.